Well, hey there, and welcome to season 1, episode 1 of the Menopause Health Podcast. And today I am so excited because we have an incredible guest who is an amazing entrepreneur. She's a registered nurse. She has an MED in counseling psychology. She's the founder of the Embracing Hormones community. And quite candidly, in addition to being an in-demand, sought-after expert in hormones and sexuality, she is also an incredible therapist. And so Camille Lawson is a mom of 3. She is an avid tennis player and quite a competitive golfer, I will say, but she's also one of my best friends. And the reason I wanted her to helm the first episode of this season is because in the Menopause Health Podcast, we are talking about the health issues that women face going through perimenopause, menopause, and beyond, and things that aren't frequently addressed or talked about. And some of these issues are things that women do not feel comfortable talking about. So we want to be your go-to resource when you are finding out how to help yourself or how to help your patients and clients. And so in this episode, Camille and I are going to talk about vaginal health. We are going to talk about changes in terms of sexuality for desire, physiological changes, and how women can have those challenging conversations with their partner to really get vulnerable and talk about what they're feeling. So with that, let's jump into this episode with the one and only Camille Lawson.
Welcome to the Menopause Health Podcast, your go-to resource for practical advice brought to you by credentialed health professionals and industry experts. Here is your host, Susan Sly.
Well, oh my gosh, Camille, I am so excited to be here with you and to think that we get to share a conversation that we might have over coffee or a cocktail talking about menopause, talking about sexuality and hormones, and we get to invite the world to hear. So thank you for being here on the Menopause Health Podcast.
My honor and pleasure, Susan. As you know, we love to talk about these topics, and I think so many other women also do too. So I'm thrilled to be here with you. Thank you.
Absolutely, and practitioners as well. We're obviously in the United States, the statistic is 50 million women are in menopause. McKinsey came out with a stat that said 17% of women in decision-making roles want to leave their jobs due to lack of support during menopause. And menopause isn't just having a moment. I really feel that this is our time to be building awareness so that employers, practitioners, and those who support amazing women really understand the challenges of menopause. And before we get into your menopause journey, something I want to share is that for a lot of women, up until even recently, it has been a very private struggle. A lot of women have suffered in silence, even not talking to girlfriends about it. And for women like myself, I didn't have sisters, I didn't have a mom. So it was girlfriends like you who really helped to guide me so I would know what to expect, and just knowing what was coming, even though everyone's journey can be different, what could be coming, what it alleviated it. So Camille, would you mind sharing your own menopause journey? And for people who don't know, Camille is an amazing mom of 3, 2 gorgeous daughters and a son. And she transcended this journey in her life as a single mom. So Camille, could you share what was your menopause journey?
I will, and I'd love to, because the funny part is, because I've been in this space, as you know, Susan, as a health practitioner and someone who's passionate about the impact of hormonal balance for like over 20 years. So a long time. So when I started into my late 40s and 50s, and I knew my perimenopause time was coming, I thought, I know so much and I've got all this knowledge. I think I'm going to be spared. I thought, it's just not really going to happen to me. And I was coasting along. I'm a real proponent of bioidentical hormones. So in my 50s, even though I was getting a period every month, I started on some DHEA, some testosterone, having had some testing just to keep me balanced and feeling good. So lo and behold, I'm in my early 50s, still getting a period every month. And I'm really thinking I've got this thing licked because it ain't going to happen to me. And then one day I got a hot flash. And anyone who's had that hot flash, that first one, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what they're talking about. It was awful. And I don't have to describe because I think any woman who's had one knows, but that heat rising, my face was bright red. Beads of sweat were pouring. I was dressed really nicely. It all got like that was the end. I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, okay, I have to deal with this. And I quickly, of course, knew that my estrogen was going down. So again, I'm a proponent of the bioidentical. I started on some bias, some natural progesterone and estrogen. So I actually then felt very, very good until I was 60. And as you know, Susan, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, luckily caught very, very early. Everything is fine. I'm 63 years old now. I have a clean bill of health. Everything is good. One cannot say it was caused by the hormones. That's absolutely not definitive in any way. But I did go off all the hormones. And I'm pleased to say that once you pass through a lot of that menopause time or perimenopause, I feel great. I feel absolutely great. So the story is hopeful on the other end. Sometimes you just have to get through the steps to get there.
Well, I remember you saying, I've got this. Like, I've never had a hot flash. I remember when you got the hot flash and it was, it's this for the practitioners listening to you or for any men listening that will never go through this surge of heat. And I have, prior to being on bioidenticals, I would wake up and the sheets would just be drenched. And the funny thing is I'm a natural optimist. And I would always say, oh, well, I'm going to weigh less than I did before I went to bed because the sheets were soaked. I could wring them out. And here's a funny thing, Camille, I was talking to some girlfriends. I was speaking at an event in San Diego on AI and women's health. And I said, for the pause, our company, I've had men say, like, I don't understand the problem statement that we're solving menopause, using generative AI. And so this gal told me there's a menopause vest. And you can buy this vest that causes a heat surge. So for any women listening that your partner isn't getting it, you can go, I haven't tried this vest because why would I want to? You can have them wear this vest and they will experience what is akin to a hot flash.
They'll get through empathy.
And speaking of empathy, there has been a lot of discussion around the mental health aspect. And as a therapist, I know you deal with this day in and day out, and women can really beat themselves up. As I said, they will suffer in silence. You and I have over the years spent so much time talking to women who really, whether it's dealing with brain fog and they're ashamed, or they don't have a supportive partner, or they're not feeling empowered, or gosh, if you're not sleeping, how are you supposed to feel like yourself? Or even some of the sexual health aspects and vaginal dryness, no desire for sex. So can you speak to the mental health challenges for women going through menopause, and what are some of the bright, shiny spots you've seen in terms of just practical things women can do as they are going through this stage?
I love that, Susan. And I'll explain a little bit more about why this is happening in a moment. But let me say the shining light is what you just said, is that we are finally having those open dialogues and conversation. Having, again, been in this space for a very long time, there were very few voices trying to normalize. And we know, even though it doesn't take away the symptoms, knowing that you are not alone, and that, in fact, every single woman will go through menopause. There isn't one on the planet that will be spared. And for some, that's an easy ride. And for others, it's really not. So knowing that you're not alone and having these conversations openly, I think is number one and really important. So that's huge value. What you're doing with the pause, what I do in education, and not just the mental health therapy, but also teaching, because knowledge is really power. And this is really where I think the knowledge piece comes in, is that hormones are like a symphony, right? They're meant to be in balance. And we know in the symphony, if even one instrument's off, we've all heard when the violin goes, it's not pretty. Well, hormones are the same way. And typically what it starts with, where it affects our mental health, is our progesterone starts to go down. Very commonly, that's the number one thing. Well, when progesterone goes down, because it equals out with estrogen, it starts to give us what we call estrogen dominance, meaning it's not that we have too much estrogen, it's that we have too little progesterone. Well, ladies, progesterone happens to look after our mood, our sleep, it's our sense of calm. And so when we start to lose our progesterone, that's the first signs of that irritability and that where I can't sleep. And we all know, and Susan and I talk about sleep a lot, sleep is key to mental health. When we are sleep deprived, as we know, I can't function. You cannot deal with everything else. And so that also affects how we function day to day, how we cope in the workplace, how we are in our relationships, how we show up as a parent, as a friend, we're off. So that's a big deal. And the second one I wanted to speak about is cortisol. I talk about cortisol, as you know. I could talk about it all day long, because cortisol, which is our stress hormone, is what we call a foundation hormone. What does that mean? It means if it is out of balance, which frankly in menopausal women, in almost all of us, it's either too high or it's too low. What happens is it affects every other hormone. So if we're going to work on any hormone, we need to work on cortisol. And the good news, here's the hope piece, cortisol's not that hard to get in balance with some very specific supplements and lifestyle tips. So mental health is a big piece of how we're feeling. And we don't want to show up because we don't feel great, right?
Oh, for sure. And sleep is the new Birkin bag, in my opinion. Like when I was in my 20s, I'm like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And now in my 50s, I'm like, yes, that feeling of a good night's sleep and that refinement. And we're seeing, this is a funny aside. So we're seeing, a lot of things can really interrupt our sleep during menopause that previously didn't. Red wine is an example. Camille, I love my red wine. You love your Chardonnay, but I know if I have red wine, I am going to have not a full hot flash, but I was saying to you before, a heat surge, right? And it's going to interrupt my sleep. And so it's this give and take, just really knowing your body, even journaling and just going, okay, I did this. And this is how I slept. And to your point, there are some great supplements out there. There's so much misinformation too on hormone replacement that the early studies that were done were actually, again, very skewed. And when we're looking at even building AI models, which is my background, that the model is only as good as the data. So a lot of women were given misinformation. They were told they can't be on hormone replacement. And as a result, some of them are still suffering. And it's, to me, I'm on my little soapbox here, it's just ridiculous. You should not be not sleeping, having the brain fog, second guessing yourself. We're seeing a research study I just read, women having panic attacks, anxiety, and they're hormone related. And they're sitting there going, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Can you speak to that? Because I want you to share the story.
I'm going to.
About, yes, because I think about this all the time. Like when you had that aha moment, like something is not right.
Mm-hmm. I will share the story because it segues perfectly into what we're talking about. So there I was, age 39, having never had cycle or period problems, never having PMS in my life, literally overnight. I got PMS in such a big way. And it came to this pinnacle where a few days before my period one day, I'm on the phone with a friend. She's saying, "Now, Camille, I'm too busy tomorrow. I can't play golf." We had planned weeks in advance to have this golf game. We got our kids all looked after. I burst into tears. And I mean, not just little tears, ugly tears, sobbing on the phone. And for those who know me, they know I'm a very calm person. I'm pretty good at taking things into stride. This was so out of character. And I'm like, who am I? I didn't know who I was. And this level of irritability and almost rage was coming over me monthly. So because I'm very proactive, I was lucky to meet an integrative physician, so a medical doctor who's gone on to learn about hormones, learn about nutrition, learn about pro-aging health. Anyway, Dr. Alvin Peddle, he taught me about bioidentical hormones, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I got onto natural progesterone cream, which was my choice at the time, based on a yam cream. And I'm not kidding, literally overnight, Susan, and you know this, I'm going to say cured. My progesterone was brought back up because that's what PMS is. And I felt like me again. So being proactive, doing your due diligence is really important because you don't have to suffer in silence.
Oh, yes. Amen to that. Like this concept of waking up, and I remember like just waking up feeling like crying, and I'm going, okay, this is not me, because you and I have been girlfriends for years and years and years. I'm not a crier. It takes a lot. And it just that feeling of hopelessness and being powerless. And that really transitions to the next piece and your zone of genius, because when we're feeling like this, the last thing we want to do is have sex. Like, it just not happening. But women go through physiological changes. The vaginal dryness is a big one. And this is something, it's not like you're out for a martini with your girlfriends. You're like, yes, I've got to drive the JJ. Like, that's not what you're saying. So can you talk about some of those physiological symptoms women may experience, and what are some things that women can do about them?
Yeah, that's a really big area. And it's probably one of the last, as you said, kind of bastions of what we don't talk about with our girlfriends. But more and more, I think we're becoming more aware of the effects. So literally, as our estrogen goes down, our cortisol, as I mentioned earlier, comes up. So right away, that's playing with our sexual desire. So even someone who used to have a pretty, let's say, robust libido, desire. Everybody is different in that department, by the way. Sexuality is a continuum. There isn't, sort of a right or a wrong, or 2.5 times a week is sort of spot on, everybody. No, it's what works for you and your partner. But that being said, that desire can plummet so quickly. And a lot of women are left going, what is that it? Like, I'm done. And part of that, which is the piece that's not talked about, is as our estrogen goes down, estrogen affects all of our tissues in our body. So there's a misnomer that it's just it's our skin. It's where, when our estrogen goes down, the skin on our face, we start to get more wrinkled. And if you think about it, our vaginal is connective tissue, and it's the same kind of tissue. So it gets dry and the tissues start to thin. And I don't like the word atrophy, but it's an appropriate word just to put a picture. It's yuck, I know, but picturing. And then you think, now you're supposed to have intercourse if you're in a heterosexual couple, and the paper thin tissue of the vaginal walls, it's like it's so fragile, you get little micro tears in it. And I know I'm painting an awful picture, but you can see why, if it now hurts, you don't really have desire. And I'm going to say beyond hurts, because it can be very, very painful to the point of even causing bleeding. Who the heck wants to have sex or have anything to do with it? And it also really affects a relationship, because women get in a position where they don't even really want to start, some affection and touching, which is so important for our oxytocin, our love warm hormone. So it just snowballs into then a more distance in the relationship. And I love to say, and I mean this, and you've heard me say it, Intimacy is the glue that holds us together. You know, what sets a roommate apart from a loving relationship is sexual intimacy. And it's really that connection. So the hope part is, yes, there is hope. So as far as over-the-counter things, some women can be helped with as simple as applying coconut oil. You know, simple thing we have in our cupboard. Does not work for everybody. There are over-the-counter or prescription moisturizers, vaginal moisturizers that one can use. Again, can help some people, but it doesn't really get at the problem. I'm a real proponent of a cream called Jelva. I can put the link in the show notes later, but it actually has DHEA in it, which is a hormone, doesn't go systemic, stays in the vagina, but it actually is working on the tissues. Collagen also can make a difference because collagen is restoring our connective tissue everywhere in the body, including the vaginal tissue. So some combinations of things that are getting at the problem. And frankly, there's nothing wrong with being on vaginal estrogen, a biased, again, a bioidentical type of estrogen, which can come from your medical doctor. It's applied with a syringe, a little bit, not messy, twice a week. Typically, it can restore the vaginal tissues. I think a lot of women are like, I don't want to have a hormone, but it's worth exploring to find out if it might be right for you after trying some of these other things. So yes, there's hope.
Yes, absolutely. And the woman who says, I don't want to have a hormone, I would just say why, right? Because perhaps there's been some misinformation, and that's why in this season of this show, we are going to have the president of the North American Menopause Society, Dr. Lisa Larkin's going to come on. She's a double breast cancer survivor. She's going to talk about hormones. I mean, again, the misinformation. Camille, since we already know the show is going to have an X rating because we're talking about sex, what are things women should not put up their vagina? Because I want to make sure you and I have spoken about this too, because women who are desperate and they don't know, they go to their farm, like their drugstore, their Walgreens, their Shoppers Drug Mart, their CVS, and they're like, oh, so what should you not put up the vagina?
Anything with scent. Anything. There's all these products out there about trying to make your vagina smell like this. Our vaginas are self-cleaning, ladies. The smell that is there is natural. And for most men or women, it's a turn on. It's about pheromones. So anything with a scent is so irritating to our vaginas. Anything that is saying, I'm going to clean it out, I'm going to flush, any of that stuff. No, even as much as sitting in highly scented bathtubs with a lot of scent, not great for our vaginal tissue. You know, go for something like the Epsom salts. That's what I do. I love Epsom salt baths. Great for all tissues. You're absorbing the magnesium into you, et cetera, et cetera. But so just be really careful of what you're putting in.
And I know this may sound obvious, but it's, and I don't know the answer to this, but I've also heard like anything with petroleum jelly or anything really synthetic should just be a no. Like you said, coconut oil.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, doesn't work for everybody, but worth a try. Sure. Always checking your ingredients. You know, we're getting so much better about not putting creams and things with parabens, et cetera, and phthalates onto our skin. But you'd be amazed at how many products that people want us to put into ourselves have these kind of toxins. So you really want to be a label reader. And I would encourage people to go, like I said, kind of start with the basic, the good quality moisturizers, look at some creams that are high quality and have all the right ingredients. And you can look at vaginal estrogen and collagen and things like that actually work.
It's funny you mentioned coconut oil, Camille, because I was doing this talk and it was for family offices in the United States. And I was brought in as the, AI health expert, and, menopause came up. And so suddenly out of the audience, this very serious financial guy goes, oh yes, coconut oil. My wife's going through menopause and coconut oil. And he was so enthusiastic about the coconut oil. And I'm like, dude, chacun son goût, right? Like to each his own. But like it's amazing to your point that you have people who've been together for a long period of time. The divorce rate for women is in this age cohort is on the way up. The suicide rate sadly is on the way up for women in the menopausal years and perimenopausal. And we look at that and, going back to this whole thought about, well, I don't want to go on hormones. I have girlfriends who say that. And again, I go, why? Could you talk about this whole train of misinformation that women have had for years? Because you in Canada, you have worked with some of the top integrative physicians, and you and I have big fans of Christy Prause, Dr. Petal, and so forth. But could you talk about where that misinformation and where it originated from?
Absolutely. And this is a big topic right now. And there's thankfully a lot of excellent medical practitioners who are speaking on the topic. I just listened to a podcast with Claire Haver. Really, really good. So just in a nutshell, very quickly, we know you alluded to it back in 2002. They did this massive study that on hormone replacement therapy. And let's be clear, when we talked about HRT, we're talking about what we call synthetic hormones. So not hormones that are the same as in our body, but they are designed chemically, but to alleviate the symptoms of low estrogen and progesterone specifically. So in this large cohort of study, they wanted to see the effects on all sorts of things. Lo and behold, a large number of women statistically started to have heart disease and breast cancers. So they halted this study abruptly due to all sorts of bureaucracy and issues. The word just got out to the media: hormones are bad. Hormones cause heart disease. Hormones cause breast cancer. So there was this total ban for many years, and this fear that was out there, both amongst physicians and media and the general population. So lo and behold, some doctors started to investigate and found out, which have been around for a very long time, what we call bioidentical hormones, simply meaning molecularly structured the same as the hormones that we make in our body. And instead of, even though they're made in a lab the same way, they're coming from more plant-based substances like soy and yam. So that became more acceptable for a lot of people. They would get testing done. As I said earlier, integrative functional medicine doctors have gone on to study more about hormones and nutrition, which traditional doctors often have not. Not their fault, can't learn everything, but that's the way it was. Roll forward to today, I'm thrilled actually to say that many even pharmaceutically based physicians and integrative have recognized that hormone replacement therapy in both the pharmaceutical realm, which has also gone a little more bioidentical, and or the bioidentical. I'm not going to enter into that it needs to be either or arena, because there's already a lot of controversy there. They're both healthy and fine in today's market and what we're doing today. What we have found, Susan, is incredible data that when HRT is taken in the first 10 years of perimenopause into menopause, the protectant for our hearts alone is enormous. Guess what? Heart disease remains the number one killer, not cancer, for women and men, but for women. So what we can do to protect our heart is get our estrogen and our progesterone on board. And the side piece is we feel like ourselves again. So for women who are sailing through or aren't so bothered or don't have, fine, absolutely, no need to take HRT, but absolutely worth a discussion with your health practitioner. And may I add, if your health practitioner doesn't understand anything about hormones, that's fine. Find one that does. There's more and more and more out there who do. So that 10 years of protecting our hearts is really important and can make a huge difference. Not to mention the vaginal dryness, the mood, the libido, the sleep, the hot flashes. So I encourage everybody to be empowered with knowledge.
We didn't even talk about long periods. Like I would have 2-week periods and heavy bleeding it was debilitating at times. And
Mhm.
and again, women, you do not need to suffer. And there are many different ways that hormones have really evolved. When I started on estrogen, it was first the estrogen patch. That didn't work for me because you know how I work out, and it would just keep falling off. And so I went to the practitioner I go to, and I'm like, this is not working. And then so we went to the cream, and the cream obviously works for me, but there are different modalities, whether it's a suppository form, whether it's a patch, whether it's a cream. I mean, there's many different ways. There's oral. So Camille, I want to ask you, because when you're thinking about, there's not a one trick pony. Like, it's not just, okay, go on hormones and that's it. There's a big lifestyle component. And I want to give Camille a shout out, because the day we're doing this show, she just crushed it in a tennis match. So Camille is an avid tennis player, and I would say an aggressively competitive tennis player. And anyway, so she crushed it in a 2.5 hour match in 35 degrees Celsius weather. And Camille, you are so active, and you and I are, we've traveled together. We have this very active lifestyle, and that, in my Pareto's principle, it's like 80% of the battle. You can't sit there on your butt and be like, I'm a smoker, I'm overweight, and suddenly I'm going to go on hormones and my life's going to be rosy. It doesn't work like that. So Camille, what are the lifestyle tips that you have for women in perimenopause and menopause?
Well, thanks for the shout out on the tennis. It was a nice.
I had to get that in.
I
sister.
love
So proud of you.
I'm appreciative. Winning is more fun. What can I say? But it actually does really speak to the point of, how do you want to feel? At the end of the day, we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. It really is about longevity and quality of life. And it's about, I want to help people, and I know Susan is the same, and the whole mission behind the pause, to wake up and feel great every single day. Is that possible? Absolutely it is. Building on the small habits every single day, which is what I know Susan and I and lots of women and men that I know are committed to. The key is, it's not about rigidity. It's not about all or nothing. Yes, no, black, white. Life is not that way, and it's frankly not enjoyable to live that way. But if you can be committed to these daily habits most days that contribute to waking up feeling great, that's really my measure, with energy, because let's face it, a lot of people are tired. So some of the habits that I encourage my clients and my coaching clients and my friends and me to bring into our life is quality sleep. That is, honestly, as we said earlier, probably one of the number one things. I'm a huge proponent of magnesium glycinate. Magnesium glycinate is one of those basic magnesiums that's not going to give you loose bowel movements and can really contribute to a deep, more restorative sleep. Everybody should also get their magnesium checked. By the way, most of us are quite low in magnesium. Getting enough protein. I'm not going to say measure everything. I don't believe in that, but around 100 grams. For some people, it's going to be a little bit more. For some, it might be a little bit less. That's actually a significant amount of protein. As we get older, we lose lean muscle. We want to keep and, in fact, build our lean muscle. So adequate protein spread throughout the day. I want people to have protein with each and every meal and snack that they have. It also prevents our blood sugar from going up, which is a huge problem as we get older. Next one is exercise. Susan, I can tell you, I have traveled enough with you. This woman, even if she has to be on a plane, I'm not kidding you, at 6 o'clock in the morning, she is 20 minutes even on a treadmill at a hotel at 4 a.m. Now, I am not that committed, but she is, and she knows that she needs to do that. Exercise is actually the key to longevity and, frankly, weight resistance. So we know, and it's never too late, by the way, never too late to introduce starting to lift weights. They have studies where people as old, I shouldn't even say old, as older as 80, 85, start to incorporate light weights and resistance training. And lo and behold, their flexibility is improving, their strength, their ability to be mobile That's a big, big one. I also want people to follow what I call loosely like a Mediterranean diet. Forget all these other diets. That's my true opinion. I think rigidity in diet is ridiculous. Food is wonderful, but choose whole, great food, not processed food, and follow loosely the Mediterranean diet of balanced protein, carbs, and quality fats, and enjoy. I think that's also, at the end of the day, what really matters, right, Susan? And I know we agree on these, is experiences, your relationships, living a happy life, but it does start with how we feel inside. And there are really these steps that we can do each and every day that make a big difference in how we feel.
Absolutely. And this whole concept of 21 days to build a habit. So someone listening, they're maybe not exercising, or they're maybe not committed to their sleep hygiene. They're still scrolling, whatever social media, or trying to do emails before you go to sleep. That's the worst thing you can do. Is that it for some people, day one, they can just stop doing something. And for other people, it may take not 21 days. It might take you 21 months to get into that habit. To your point, though, in the whole piece around resistance training, years ago, I owned a health club in the 90s, and there was a woman who would come in every morning, and she was almost 80. And Camille, she looked like just her, if you didn't see her face, her body, you would swear, was in her 30s, and she was lean and ripped. And she said, I didn't start weight training until I was 78. And she was actually at this point lifting heavy. She was swimming a mile a day. That was her cardio. And I said, why did you start lifting weights? And she said, I started to look at my friends, and they were hunched over, and they had the bat arms and things like that. She was like, I don't need to do that. And so that's what she did. And it was such an inspiration. And women shouldn't be afraid to lift heavy either. And in this season, we will have Dr. Paul Arciero coming on, and he is an expert in nutrition. He's an expert in fitness. Women shouldn't be afraid to lift heavy, body weight resistance as well. But yesterday I did a yoga class, and we were doing these yoga squats and flexibility and body weight resistance, all of the planks, all of the shavasanas, not shavasana, sorry, chaturangas, like going down.
I like shavasana.
Shavasana, if you don't know, that's the lying down pose, right? Doing all of those things. And so it's that variety, like you said, in the diet. It's also the variety in the exercise as well. Final question for you. I hear this all the time. My husband doesn't understand. And the reason I'm calling out husbands particularly in this statement is, let's say you've been with, if you're in a relationship with, we have amazing friends and investors in the company who are in same-sex marriages. And if you're in a marriage with a woman, chances are you're both going to go through menopause. There's a different understanding. But I'm calling out a relationship with a woman and a man where they've been together for a long time. A woman is going through these changes, and suddenly, like, you want the bedroom. Like, I keep my bedroom at 67 degrees, and God bless my husband, Chris. He has not once complained about it. At first he was like, the air conditioning bill. And I'm like, I pay the damn air conditioning bill. I don't care. Like, I'm sweating. Like, I don't, put a blanket on, honey. And he has been so supportive about it. But I hear about women, their husbands, their partners are not supportive. They don't get it. There's a lot of tension in the relationship. What advice, because you are an expert in this area, you deal with this all the time, what advice would you give to a woman who is in a relationship like that, in terms of advocating for herself, in terms of having conversations? What should she do?
It's a really good question, and such an important one, given what I said earlier, that intimacy really is the glue that holds us together. And this can be such a divisive time, and it really comes down to communication. And I know that sounds a bit trite, but I don't mean it at all that way, because the natural tendency during this time, because appreciating that that women just feel so like just so not like themselves. It's hard to communicate and be vulnerable and share with your partner how absolutely awful you feel and maybe even scared. But this is really the time to bring your partner on board and trust that the foundation that you've created over the years, that the time that you've been together, men, we've learned, they want to know. They are on our side. Our men want us to feel better. They want to support us, but they often feel very helpless. And part of that, I'm going to put the blame on us, is because we're supposed to be strong. We do tend to talk to our girlfriends a lot, and that's fantastic. I'm all for that. But what we do is we tend to get our emotional relief from speaking to our girlfriends, and we kind of leave our men on the sidelines, don't we? And we don't let them in because we've already gotten that. So they don't really know that when we say no thanks, no sex again, maybe we haven't really talked to them about that it hurts, that I have no desire, that I feel frumpy and yucky, and that I didn't sleep again last night. So I think that communication, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and seen, and let him comfort you and be part of the solution. And it's also, I'll say it again, knowledge is power. Allow him and help him to learn as you're navigating this, why you might be choosing HRT, why you're going to bed at 10 o'clock, because those hours give you a more restful sleep if you're in bed by 10. And I am living testament to that. Quality of my sleep, by the way, when I'm in bed at 10 or even 10:30, as opposed to 11 or 11:30 or 12, is night and day. So if you haven't let your man know that, why are you going to bed to read your book at 9 again? You're shutting me out. No, explain. I'm sorry, I'm going to read my book because this is what I need to do right now so that I can wake up and feel better tomorrow. And it's also bringing them on board around the sex piece. Maybe you are going to try some vaginal Jolva cream or collagen or coconut oil. Well, bring him in on that. Make it fun. Like, don't forget there's some playfulness to it. So talk.
And that's huge too. And even with a partner that is a different age, and maybe you're going through this change before they are, and to have that open communication. And the other thing I would say is, when the communication isn't necessarily working, get help, see a sex therapist, see a couples therapist, someone who is trained in this, like Camille, because you don't have to suffer. And like you said so beautifully, it's like, remember what that foundation is. And I know, even for myself with my husband, I don't know, who knows if Chris will ever listen to these episodes, he might, who knows. But for us, as you know, Camille, we've been together almost a quarter of a century now. And I'm always very, very open, and we've encouraged open communication at home, to the point where even, our daughters will talk about their periods at the dinner table, because, why wouldn't they? Right. And to be able to have the communication, the thing I will throw out that's worked for us is getting out of the house to have the communication. So when we're not having those date nights, or just, I'll say to him, we've made a new sort of couples rule where anything we're going to talk about that might be difficult or challenging, we have it out of the house. So I'll grab him and go, let's go for a walk and talk about this.
I love
that. And to also be able to, yes. And to be able to say, okay, like, maybe he's feeling, let's be intimate, and I'm not, to not just kind of brush off his feelings, like you said, owning my stuff, and to say, you know what, babe, it's not that the desire's not there. It's, I haven't slept. I had a hot flash or a heat surge. But also know that maybe what worked for you at a different period of your time, maybe you like to be intimate at night. Maybe that doesn't work anymore because maybe it's too stimulating for you. So maybe switch it up, try mornings, try something else. If you're an empty nester, afternoon delight, whatever is going to work for you. But my girlfriends who have been flexible in having the conversation, it can actually be, once the hormones are balanced, a time where there's even more sex than you've ever had, because you're not worried about a toddler coming in your room. You're not worried about, all sorts of other things that you worried about at a different phase in your life.
That is so true. And I have worked with countless couples that have found that this phase of life and moving forward, they're actually much more passionate for the reasons that you mentioned, and more so because really that whole thing, if you think about it, true vulnerability and trust, which comes from long-term relationships, is when you are free to really play and explore and be exposed, which is ultimately what sexual connection really is. It's that raw and real vulnerability. And it's fun, and we tend to forget that. So that's also the hope, the light that is absolutely possible. And I've seen it time and time again. But it does start with the communication. And I wanted to add, don't underestimate the power of that beautiful hormone oxytocin, which doesn't just necessarily come from sex and orgasm, but also comes from a hug, from a kiss, from holding a hand, from a touch. And so there's nothing that is preventing both of us, both men and women, or same-sex partners, for having that affection and bringing up that oxytocin, which in turn makes us feel more warm and loving. And it's really a win-win.
Well, and Camille, there's so many things we could talk about. That I just thought of this as you were sharing that. And remember that there was this very strange rise in STDs in people in assisted living.
Yes.
And I just thought of that study that came out. Came out years and years ago, because your intimacy doesn't die off just because you're not, in your fertility years, right? And for a lot of people, they have this resurgence, and it's even proven. And I love what you said about just, making it fun, playing, being, curious, exploring, and to know that we get to write a new chapter, and we shouldn't keep looking at the past. It's like, what do we get to create now in this relationship? So I love that. Any final words to practitioners listening, to people listening? Any final thoughts?
I think my final thought, Susan, is be compassionate, both to ourselves, to those around you. If you're a health practitioner, it's also approaching with curiosity and recognizing, as you already probably know, every body is different and unique. And the impact of all of this, the hormones, the sex life, the phases of life, are all very different for each person. So I think self-compassion, compassion to others, staying curious, and ultimately remembering, what is our goal in life? To be happy, to share experiences and wonderful relationships with people. And I think if we keep that at top of mind, it really can help guide those day-to-day choices and decisions that we're all faced with.
I love it. So beautifully said, Camille. Thank you so much for being here in episode 1, season 1 of the Menopause Health Podcast. And for everyone listening, we would love for you to share the show, drop us a comment, and just look forward. We are going to be having more amazing episodes talking about menopause, talking about implications of menopause, also talking about solutions and strategies. So once again, thanks, Camille, for being here. And I look forward to seeing everyone in the next episode of season 1.
This Menopause Health Podcast is brought to you by The Pause Technologies. To find out more, visit thepause.ai and follow us on your favorite social media channels. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, share the show, and connect with us. We will see you in the next episode.